open up the champagne, pop. It's my house, come on, turn it up. Hear a knock on the door and the night begins. Cause we've done this before, so you come on in. Make yourself at my home, tell me where you've been. Pour yourself something cold, baby, cheers to this.
Hello everyone. Thank you for viewing the show. This is Talking Real Estate with Angela Briante. I have a guest today, Kyle.
Hi. Nice to be here, and I'm excited to be here as well. So I'd like to
Yeah, thank you for being here. So Kyle, you and I met. You had walked into the office and you were looking to purchase a home, and we discussed your options and your criteria. And you had mentioned you were 22 years old.
I am.
And and I had thought, immediately that you are considered a millennial buyer. And my first question that I had for you is, are you prepared to purchase a home? And I explained the different options that you would have in terms of the minimum that would be required to put down. And you had explained to me that you are in sales.
I am.
You were gainfully employed full time.
Yes, I am.
And that you had also been preparing for this purchase because you not only are working full time after college, you landed this good job, and then you also were investing money into stocks and various investments. So you really fascinated me because you had the vision and the foresight, not just at the age of 22, but prior to really, I almost felt ahead of the game. I was really impressed with your inspiration to do all that you did. So if you want to just speak to a little bit about, how you prepared for this, how things, how you even started to invest, and
Sure. I thank you for the kind words, Angela. But so essentially my background started with this place called the Online Trading Academy when I was in college, and I got this great internship, which I really unexpectedly got. That was awesome, where they taught me how to trade stocks, Forex, futures, and options. And I was there for 2 years. The first year was entirely a unpaid internship, and I got the classes for free. But I got, in total, the value of those classes was about $50,000 worth of a trading education. So with that, I traded and invested throughout the rest of my college career. And that put me in a position where when I graduated college, I was in a good spot financially. I didn't have any student debt. I didn't have anything really weighing me down and holding me back. No car loan, had that paid off. So when I was looking at the next steps, at that point I was already renting for 4 years. And I realized that that was my only expenditure, that I was, dishing out money that I wasn't getting back. So that's where I kind of got to the point where, I walked into your office and I thought, this is the next step. And I heard, very good things about you. So I, thought this would be the right place to go. And it was a very enlightening experience because buying a home is very complicated. It is. But at the same time, it is very worth it because you're not putting your money in someone else's pocket. Because rent now, I feel like most people understand that on average, you're probably going to be paying somewhere, on the low side, and very hard to find, $1,200 a month. But you're more likely looking at that's really low. Most likely you're looking at $1,600 to $2,000 a month.
And that's somebody else's
$20,000 a year.
That's somebody else's mortgage.
Yeah. So it's very. I feel like it's almost foolish to just give your money away like that, because I understand you do need a place to live, and saving up for that down payment sometimes can be difficult. But those are some points that we'll touch on today.
Sure. Yeah. You're building equity also. You have, it's probably one of your largest assets when you purchase a home. Yeah. So that's all planning for the future. That's great. So how do you, prior to walking into our office, how do you and how did you search for a home?
So the first thing that I really did was, just like everyone else, I went on Zillow or, a Home Finder or whatever, one of those websites, and I started looking through all the homes in my area and, looked at all the listings and, looked at the places that I wanted to potentially live. And I started doing some more research. And the one thing as a millennial home buyer that you'll start to realize is sometimes you see a great house in a great area, but at the same time, the reason that house is going for the price that you think is affordable is because the mill rate's high. Or on the other side, the value of the house is so high, but the mill rate is low. And those are things that you have to figure out when, you're purchasing a house, the amount that you're going to be paying on that mortgage, the property tax.
Sure.
And if it's going to inhibit you, because that would be, that's the worst thing that could possibly happen is you spending out of your means.
And your house poor.
In your house, yeah, and then your house
You don't
poor.
want to be house poor.
And a lot of millennial home buyers, I feel like they're looking for, the fixer-upper. But the fixer-upper can be just as expensive as that full cost house. Like the house that, is already up to date. Sometimes that fixer-upper will even be more expensive than that because of the cost that goes into that house. And people, I feel like a lot of times, especially with my generation, I think we're a little bit impulsive. And when we see a shiny, nice thing, as like a house, we tend to want it. And it's the same thing with a nice car. We want it. And a lot of times, what we want and what we can have are two different, completely different things.
Needs preparation.
Yeah.
And that's going backwards. You can't all of a sudden be here and want to go forward without this. You had done some great research. You had put together a survey.
I did.
And tell me where you posted that. Tell me the results of that. And this was all on millennial home buyers, correct? In terms of timing and preparation and capability.
Yeah. So this little survey that I did, I was interested because Angela approached me about this show, and I thought, maybe I'll put something out there and see what my immediate group of friends and the people around me on Facebook would have to say. And everyone on Facebook has a few hundred or more friends, and I think on Facebook I probably have 1,000 something friends. I might not really stay in contact with all of them, but I thought if I put a survey out there, what are the results going to look like?
Sure.
Because most of these people are my age. So I put out the survey, and I listed 3 options. Are you going to buy a house, or are you envisioning that you will buy a house in the next 5 years, in the next 5 to 10 years, or 10 to 15 years? And the results were very, very shocking, but also very, very telling. Because I feel like we've all heard, and you've probably heard this, where people say that, millennials aren't driven to buy a house, which from this survey is not true. So out of, I think a little bit over 100 people voted on it.
Oh, okay.
So a decent amount of, a decent statistical pool, which started with 7% of people said that they could buy a house in the next 5 years. Out of those 102 people, only 7% thought that they would have the means to purchase a house within the next 5 years. And this is mostly college graduates.
Okay. And do you think the majority have college debt? Do you think that's a hindrance?
I think that most people that I went to college with have college debt. And to go into that a little bit further, if you have, say, $100,000 in student debt or $80,000 in student debt, but you come out of college with a job that you're making, $100K a year, that doesn't look as bad. But if you went to school for, I don't want to put down any degree or anything like that, but if you went to school where the potential earnings where you're coming out are, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, and you have double or triple that in debt,
right?
How are you ever going to, save money, furthermore pay off your debt loans? Because on average, the average student that went to school and got student loans is paying $3,600 a year. That's not anything crazy, but added up with all your other expenses, that's a lot. It's actually, so to go into that a little bit further and bring back to like what we were talking about, so the
7%.
7%. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Angela.
That's okay.
So 7% of people said the next 5 years.
Okay.
87% of people, millennials that voted on this, said between the next 5 and 10 years.
Interesting.
And then the other like 6%, said 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
So what that is saying, and I feel like the results, they're very telling. We want to buy homes. Millennials want to buy homes. But right now, it's not feasible. It's not obtainable.
Right.
And these are people that have come out of college. They, some of them have good jobs. But that student debt, weighs them down. It weighs them down. And then past that, just the general expenses, are way more than, the past generations. I think now that generally we are paying a lot of money for a plethora of different things. The average American is spending $13,000 a year on just basic expenses: insurance, car payments, cell phone, internet, utilities, daily goods, doctor's visits. Then if you factor in mortgage and rent, that's another $8,000 to $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
Then property tax, if you already own a home, that's $7,000 to $20,000, depending on the price of your home.
Sure.
Student loans, $3,360, and just right there, that totals $31,360. The average median income in the United States is $31,786.
Wash.
So it's just a wash. If you're an average earning American, and that we're in the Northeast, so that it's probably slightly more, but our expenses are definitely slightly more.
Right.
So it's kind of it plays it plays everywhere. The numbers they're similar anywhere, because you go down south, the income might be lower, but the cost of living's lower.
Right.
So up here, using those numbers, it's an even wash.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't account for the $18,000 that the average American spends on, miscellaneous random other objects, other things that are not necessities.
Right.
So that could be part of the reason why the average American has $38,000 in credit card debt. And with $38,000 in credit card debt, depending on what your income looks like, it's pretty hard to get approved for a loan. Pretty hard to get a house.
Absolutely. Now, there are loans that offer 0% down and 3% down, like FHA loans are 3% down. There's a wonderful loan called the USDA loan, and many don't even know about it. It's actually 0% down. Then there's a 203K loan. So if someone like yourself wanted to purchase a home and have your hammer, already, there's something called a 203K loan. So you'd be able to purchase the home, and the bank would actually loan you the money for the projects, and then you repay that loan after the project's complete. So that's a wise actually investment for somebody who wanted to renovate a home, remain in it, or do that all over again. But there's lots of options, and I think I just was more curious. Someone like your age, how are you doing research on loans, and were you knowledgeable of the opportunities, not to have, you always hear, on the street, even
20%.
before 20%, see, yeah, and that's not the case at all. So what, were you aware of that you would be able to purchase a home with that amount down, and did it matter to you? I know you really had some strong preparation behind you. I was really impressed when we first met. So, but you're not probably the average buyer that's 22 years old. So somebody who does have a decent job, who is settled, who is renting and says, gee, the rent that I'm paying will definitely, pay for a mortgage, just about, right? If depending on what they're paying in rent.
A lot of times the mortgage is even more. The mortgage is even less.
Rent,
the mortgage is even less than the rent. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then you get the tax write-off. So there's obviously other advantages as well in building equity. And then you have something. It's kind of like leasing a car. I had my first lease experience. It's going back in a month. And I will never lease a car again because it's going back and I have nothing.
Yep.
The dealership does now, but I have nothing. So
that's the thing. I feel, for me at least, I didn't want to keep putting money in other people's pockets. So for me, when I was doing the research, and the way that I did this at first was I wanted to see my other options. I got this job and I was making good money. So I decided, okay, what can I do with that money? Because, I only want to put so much in my investment accounts and, life insurance, stuff like that. Because you want to diversify your portfolio. You want to have, a lot of different things working for you. And if, one of those things fails, you have something else that's working for you as well. So part of it is the preparation on having, a stable, economic standing, where exactly what you can spend, what your budget could be. And then past that, when I came into this process and I walked into your office, my knowledge on loans was somewhat limited, and I didn't really know what would be the best option. I didn't know about some of the criteria that some of the loans require. I didn't understand, really, how easy it is to purchase a house if you have even that basic, down payment amount.
Sure.
So.
And good credit.
And good
It's
credit.
essential
Credit is
too,
essential.
right.
Credit is
Yes,
essential.
Absolutely.
I checked my credit score yesterday, and I had a 756 or something
Great.
like that.
Fantastic.
So, and that's the thing. Building credit, that's a huge thing that I think millennials really should focus on. Starting at a young age, you can apply for a credit card. I think I got my first credit card at the age of 17, and you can apply for credit cards and start building that credit. Start, making your payments every month. Use it for gas. Use it for stuff that you would, if you have the money to pay for that credit card, use the credit card, and then just pay it off, because you're building credit and you're establishing a credit line. So when it comes time to buy that house, a bank doesn't look at you like, what standing do you have to buy this house? You don't. What credentials do you have?
Right.
Because
and you get air miles.
Yeah. And air miles. Yeah, exactly. Right. And so it's very it's very disheartening when I feel like you hear that people don't really understand that this is an option. Buying a house really is not something that you have to wait until you're 35 to do. It's an investment.
Right. I have some advice that was given to me. Actually, it wasn't advice. It was information that was given to me probably about 25 years ago, and it resonated with me. And I always thought about it over the past 25 years. I was at a kind of like a play group. It was like a mommy and me type play group, and we're all kind of hanging around with the kids. And one of the moms had specifically said, "My husband and I purchased the home specifically on one income, or purposely on one income." And it just made sense that they had planned for that, because fast forward down the road, if divorce, someone loses their job, or a multitude of reasons where there's only one income, that home is secure, right? So that's really a good analysis to do, and I don't see that these days. I see everybody just under the max of where they should purchase, and that's a personal decision, but it differed much more than how it used to be. And someone to say that purposely or intentionally, it actually made a lot of sense. And I think about that over the years as I see people struggling and pushing the bank to really max out, and things happen.
And that's the thing. And like I said earlier, everyone wants the biggest, shiniest house. They always, people go to their means. They try to spend as much as they can. But that scenario that you just gave is actually something very similar to what I'm doing. Whereas, my girlfriend, she's in her last year of nursing school. So theoretically, I could wait a year. We would have two incomes that are, generally a lot higher than the average income in the United States. And we could go out there and buy, a $500,000 or $600,000, $700,000 home. But at the same time, if one of us gets laid off, if one of us gets fired, that's our entire income going to keep our house.
Exactly.
And with other, other investments, other saved money, consistently saving is something that's huge. I at least personally for myself, I try to put away about 10% of my paycheck, every single paycheck, sometimes even more. But at least I have money on the side that I don't have invested. I just have in a savings account. Because if anything does ever arise, it's there. Right. But I think for, a millennial home buyer, and in kind of speaking to and changing the direction of this, a lot of times I feel like it's very hard to be in the correct position to purchase a house. I think that a lot of people are very limited, and it requires a very, almost perfect kind of combination of things to happen for someone to be able to purchase a house in their early to mid 20s. I really think that this includes, you have to have a very low amount of student debt. I think that student debt really weighs down a lot of people, especially if they come out of school and can't find a good job. It's almost like debilitating. Right. And then past that, good credit, we just talked about that. You need to have good credit. If you don't have good credit, you really can't buy a house unless you have an unbelievable income where, credit's secondary almost.
Right.
which is a very rare scenario, I would say.
Right. It's so important to have good credit, and that's something that doesn't happen immediately. You have to really plan and be on top of your things. Another topic that comes to mind, my brother, who's 52 right now, 52, purchased his home when he was 22 years old. He purchased it in Paterson, New York. He knew that he would stay in Paterson the rest of his life because he put thought and time into purchasing a home with 13 acres behind him. He's a hunter.
Okay.
So he purposely knew that when he searched, he wanted to be with a home that had some acreage that he would be able to hunt on his own property. So now fast forward, 30 years later, he's still there, no intention of moving, doesn't get out and hunts like he used to, he's, older and busier and tireder, but he does like to have that option. But the thing I hear with millennials, and I don't know, you'd be able to answer this better, is that they are much more in touch with how they feel and what they want to do. So an example would be a friend of mine's son decided that had a decent job and decided that he wanted to go live in, I think it was Chicago. And he just upped and went, and a couple of his buddies went, said, yeah, it sounds like a great idea too. And off they went to Chicago. And that was just, they felt like that's where they were going to be. It wasn't, they weren't thinking so much about, building on the existing jobs that they had and progressing there. So that's just one example, but there is chatter in the real estate industry, but that's what's happening. They're not committing to one area because they want to experience more and more different locations, and then, like your statistics said, in 5 to 10 years, maybe hang their hat.
A house.
But certainly it seems like there's a lot of flexibility in that age range, if that's something that you see as well.
I think I definitely see that, but I would say almost I wouldn't say the opposite, but I would say something that people in that kind of scenario where they might envision themselves moving. Think of a house as an investment. If you have the money to buy a house and save yourself on rent in your current area. Say, even if you're unhappy with your job, but you're making good money, you can have an asset. Buying a house is an asset. And then what you do with that asset, you could do so many different things. You could rent it out. You could Airbnb it. There's so many different options. So don't think of buying a house as, making you settle down for the next 30 years of your life. It's an investment. If, housing prices go up, you could have made some money. And if you decide to sell, that's part of the process. You want to buy in an area that it's easy to sell. You don't have to buy in an area where it's going to be stagnant and selling that house is going to be impossible. You can kind of pick and choose. That's the beauty of being a home buyer. You can buy a house where you want to buy a house. So if you buy a house in the right area, you shouldn't have any issue selling it down the line. And sure, the maintenance of a house, the upkeep. Some people would prefer a condo. Some people would prefer an apartment. Right. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't want to live, with neighbors right next door, or you're just not comfortable paying $1,800, $2,000 a month in rent when you could own a house and go home and that's your piece of property and your well-being.
Right. With your rules.
With your rules. You don't have to listen to, you don't have a landlord who, is constantly checking in to make sure his property's okay.
Right.
You're the landlord. You own the house. Right. You can do whatever you want, which is beautiful. I think that's a great thing that really is just, it's special. It's something that I think that millennials, I feel like really, I feel like my generation is constantly changing. I feel like we're I said this earlier, very impulsive. So speaking back to what you were saying about your friend's son moving to Chicago, I think that if they think that a better opportunity is out there, I think that, anyone in my generation, it's all about opportunity. And I think that
shiny ball.
The shiny ball. That's the thing. That's the thing, because realistically, my generation, has kind of followed in the path of older generations with huge credit card debt. I believe 51% of millennials are in credit card debt, and that number it actually extends pretty far. I think only a small portion of them, I think 5%, have more than $30,000 in credit card debt.
Wow.
But 51% of millennials have credit card debt, so we're inclined to spend. It's just that we're not really spending on houses at this point. And I think that in the future, if things start to change, start to shift, and the mindset changes. If the mindset changes, then we could see a big influx of home buyers. But because the thing is though, and from the survey that I gave, 87% of pretty much actually 100% of millennials that did that survey. I mean, I gave 4 options actually. One was never buy a house, and actually no one picked that option. 100% of people that did that poll wanted to buy a house. So at some point, these people will try to buy a house. And if it is possible, if they can figure out their debt to income ratio, they can figure out exactly what needs to be done to buy a house, it's very possible.
Sure.
So
it's possible for anyone, as long as there's some preparation behind it and income, obviously. It's something that is attainable for all. So I think it's, I'd like to think that you represent your generation, because it's quite impressive. And I want to thank you very, very much for being on the show, because I know how busy you are. You're out there pounding the pavement, and you're working hard, and that's great. And I'm glad you're here. So I appreciate you spending the time. And we have about 1 minute left. Is there anything else you want to say out to the audience?
Well, I think the one big thing is, for my generation, the biggest thing for any of us is to network, and build those connections. So when you have those conversations about buying a house, or you have those conversations about home inspections or things like that, you have the people to go to, because you have to use your resources. People who don't use the resources, people who don't ask for help, you're limiting yourself. If you ask for help and you get the correct help, you'll be in a much better position. But I really appreciate what Angela's done for me, and kind of has given me some insight on exactly how this process works, because understanding the process is half of it.
Sure.
The other half of it is doing the research yourself and putting that together. Then you could buy that perfect house for yourself, or the new car, or whatever the case may be. But you have to just set yourself up for the potential of success, and that's very hard to do. But with the correct dedication and drive, you really can accomplish anything.
Sure.
You really can.
And you make an educated decision, and it just gets you exactly where you need to be.
And set goals. Set goals. I think that's the biggest thing. For me, at least, my goal is to be in a house by February, March next year, and to be in the house that I want to be in, and the house that I feel happy paying for every day.
Right.
Because that's the thing. People, they want to feel good about their investment, and I think that's one thing that can make you very happy. It's a house.
Wonderful.
So,
thank you very much, Kyle Nettland. Thank you for being a guest on the show today. We hope to have you back. You're a wealth of information. Maybe we'll have you back after you purchase your home. Then you could speak about the process and all the visits to Home Depot that you're making once the home is sold. I always tell first-time home buyers, invest in Home Depot now. They have good stock, because you'll be visiting quite often. So thanks again. We'll plan ahead for another show. I think it will be fantastic.
Sounds good.
All right, great.
Open up the champagne, pop. It's my house, come on, turn it up. Hear a knock on the door and the night begins. 'Cause we've done this before, so you come on